Dr. Jennifer Mitchell is here today to speak to us. She is the Public Communications Coordinator with the St. Johns River Water Management District. Dr. Mitchell is passionate about Florida's incredible water resources and hopes to spark your interest in what you can do to help protect Florida's waterways. After earning her PhD in forest ecology from Auburn University, she completed a postdoc at the University of Florida in soil and water science. She now works to spread the message of how individuals can reduce their impact on our waterways. So please give a Rotary welcome to Dr. Jennifer Mitchell.
Thank you.
Perfect. Well, thank you all so much for inviting me here today. I'm hoping that you will have lots of questions. I heard that y'all will definitely have a lot of questions. So hopefully I'll be able to address those or write them down and get them to the people that are most able to address them. I have a background in science, as you could hear with the PhD in forest ecology, but I really enjoy the opportunity to share some of that knowledge with individuals that may not have backgrounds in the sciences. And Florida is such a unique place where our waters are so interconnected, and everything that we do has an impact on those. And so hopefully through today's presentation, you'll understand a little bit more about what the St. Johns River Water Management District is doing to help protect our water resources, and ways that you also can help with that. So how many of you have heard of the St. Johns River Water Management District? Follow us in the news. Awesome. So a lot of times I have been to Rotary meetings and people are like, well, I've heard about them. I don't really know what you do, other than I see the name in the newspaper of how y'all are doing this and that. And so I do want to take this opportunity to explain a little bit about what we do and our core mission. And so the St. Johns River Water Management District is one of the 5 water management districts, and we were created back in the 70s. They're broken up along the hydrologic boundaries. However, as we're going to talk in just a little bit, our current source of our water is no longer broken up on those hydrologic boundaries, so not based on watersheds. So it's more the aquifer, right? So we do work with the other water management districts to be able to ensure that there is enough water moving forward. But our entire district covers the whole watershed of the St. Johns River, the northern portion of the Indian River Lagoon, and then Baker and Nassau counties up with the St. Mary's River as well, and then the northern coastal basin rivers. It is our mission to make sure that there is enough water for us, the people, the growing populations, and our natural systems. And so I'm going to go through a few of the ways that we are legislatively mandated to do that, and the ways that we are accomplishing that. Ultimately, we'll talk a little bit about each one of these 4 core missions, because all of the work that we do does fall under one of these 4 core missions. So those are going to be water supply, and we'll talk about that in just a second, water quality, flood protection, and natural systems. And so I already mentioned that a majority of our water that we utilize, whether it's in our homes, whether it's that water that agriculture uses, whether it is the water that is helping to provide us with some of our industry uses, it comes from our Floridan aquifer. However, probably not each one of you think about our aquifer on a daily basis, or you're not thinking unless maybe you go out to the springs and you're like, oh, wow, look at how beautiful this is. I'm wondering how I'm connecting or impacting the aquifer. So we're going to take a little tour down into the aquifer. So we all might be more familiar with those lakes and rivers, right? Our surface waters that we can see as we drive around Florida. We do have an abundance of those. We have an abundance of wetlands as well. And so frequently people ask me, they say, why does it matter if I save water? Clearly we have a whole lot of it in Florida. It's not really that important, is it? But that interconnection in the amount of water that each individual uses is why it is important to conserve water. So we might think about those surface sands and the way that the water is going to move through that the surface of our landscapes. In some areas of our district, we have this confining layer. So there's that clay layer, water doesn't move down through. It's going to be an area where we have lots of wetlands, where that water might be moving in that superficial aquifer system out to our closest river, nearest lake. In those areas, and this is a common question as well, while I'm watering my yard, isn't it just going right back down into the aquifer where it came from? If you live in one of these areas where there's the confining unit, it's not going to make it back down to where that water ultimately came from unless you do have one of the like shallow irrigation wells. So just wanted to kind of throw that out there as well. And then across the entire state of Florida, up into South Carolina, across southern Georgia, and over into Alabama, is the Floridan aquifer system. And that's where 98% of the people within our district get their drinking water. And that's going to be the fresh water that's coming into homes. And this is a limestone aquifer system. It is capable of producing large amounts of water, but that water is ultimately coming from rainfall that is going to originate in those areas on the far side, those important recharge areas. And underneath the entire Floridan aquifer system, there's this saltwater layer. That salt water is at the bottom because it's heavier. And so it's really important that we are thinking about how we're using that fresh water, because if we overutilize our fresh water, and especially more in coastal regions, we can cause the saltwater intrusion to occur in our utilities wells, in our well fields. And that can render wells useless or require upgrades and treatment techniques. But if we leave enough fresh water in the aquifer, we can keep that saltwater layer down deep enough that it's not going to be problematic. So we see here that that water is refilling the aquifer in those important recharge areas. The Ocala National Forest down across through Tampa, that's really like the kind of corridor of where a lot of the recharge occurs within the state of Florida. And then of course it comes up in our springs. And so you may have heard the springs be called the window to our aquifer. And then we can't forget about us and how our development and our roads and our homes, we've altered the way that water is moving through this cycle with our increased runoff and utilizing water for our landscapes through irrigation. So really quickly, I'm going to talk a little bit about our 4 core missions. And so our natural systems, probably one of my favorite and probably most people's favorite, is that the district owns and manages over 700,000 acres of property. These are protecting important water resources. A lot of these resources or properties are along the St. Johns River or along lakes. And so they are an abundance of wetlands. Wetlands are one of the greatest ways that we can accomplish all 4 missions all at the same time. Wetlands slow down the flow of water. They help with flood protection. They're going to help with water quality. They filter those nutrients. And of course, wetlands are natural systems. But in order to maintain and manage these systems, we have to do things like prescribed fire. So we have to maintain the systems so that they're able to continue being the right ecosystems to provide habitat for the species that would live on them. We also offer access to the public to get out and enjoy these properties. So if you enjoy hiking or biking or fishing, boating, a lot of those you can do on district properties. And one of the best things is you can do it for free, or your tax dollars have already paid for it. So either way you want to look at it. And then we also have to treat for invasive species because everything wants to live in Florida. So these are just a couple examples of some of our district properties. This picture at the bottom is a really cool endemic plant that only lives in Northeast Florida, and it's on a couple of our properties. It's Bartram's Ixia, so it's a very rare plant, but through our prescribed fire regime, it is able to have a fairly large stand there. There are some of the different examples, and we also have some very primitive camp locations or camping. So we have a really great website that tells you where those properties are, what you can do on them. And as you can tell, they are distributed across the entire district. water supply, so that water that we utilize, and we want to make sure that there is enough of it to supply us and our natural systems with water. We get questions a lot of time as, so how high a water quality are you supplying? We aren't the ones that are, we are not the utility, we are not supplying that water. We are just wanting to make sure that there is enough of it for our utilities. So one of the ways that we accomplish that is through our regional water supply plans. And so here we are in the Central Florida Water Initiative. Some of you may be familiar with that water supply plan. It is a collaboration between our district, the Southwest Florida Water Management District, and the South Florida Water Management District, because again, in Central Florida, we're all using the aquifer to supply our water. And so we don't want to get in a race of who can use the greatest amount of this shared resource so that it's not available for the other people. And so through this plan, we utilize projections of what population growth will be. We look at what is the current available supply. We use projections of how much alternative water supply is there currently and will there be. And then we take all of that information, combine it together, and come up with plans of how we're going to be able to meet the demand for water now and into the future. Because in Central Florida, newsflash, it's growing. But we know that in the next 20 years, our aquifer will not be able to continue supplying the water that we need in the way that we're using it currently. So we know that there need to be plans to make sure that we're able to meet those demands. One of the greatest ways that we're working with utilities is through utilizing that treated wastewater as an alternative source of water for things like irrigation. So that's a little bit about that. And if you are interested in further about just the Central Florida Water Initiative, I'm sure that the person that's in charge of that would be happy to come and give you more information about that. So you guys are the second audience that I've gotten to share our 2020 numbers with in terms of water use. And so I really enjoy being able to provide information about how fresh water is used within our district. So graphs may not make everybody else really excited, but they make me excited. But for 2020, our district alone, so those all are portions of 18 counties, used a little over 1 billion gallons a day of fresh water. That's all of our counties, all of the people. That's around a population of about 5.5 million people. So we can see here really easily that public supply, so those are people that are getting their water from utilities and people that have wells at their homes, that we make up over 60% of the water that's used. And so a lot of times we like to say, oh, we need this other entity to save water. They're going to be the ones that are able to really make a difference. But here we can see that the 5.5 million people that are living here are having a really big impact. And it's through behavior change of each one of us that we can shrink this pie overall. And while the amount of water that we have used within the district went up about 1% from last year to this, or from 19 to 20, a lot of that has been able to be accomplished of only going up 1% with that increase of population, because of the increased use of that reclaimed water to meet the needs of things like irrigation. And so this graph just shows, based on county, how much of that reclaimed water, so that treated wastewater, is being put to use in an alternative source. So for irrigation, or in Alachua County's case, a lot of it makes its way back out into the aquifer through Paynes Prairie. So when we think about each one of us and how much water we're using, those reports tell us all about population and how much is being used. And we use about 86 gallons of water per person per day. A lot of information is showing that half of that is getting used outside. And even half of that, if we're not paying attention to our irrigation, that half of that that's being utilized is just being wasted. It's going out into our stormwater systems. And so there are some things that you can do to save water in your landscape. So cutting your water use in half, or addressing that half. Who knows what this thing is down in the bottom? Rain sensor. There's a really important part that y'all missed on that. A functioning rain sensor. Makes it so that if it is raining or it has rained recently, it turns off your irrigation system. And that functioning part, although it sounds kind of silly, there have been some tests done at UF of all of the different kinds of rain sensors, and they only last between 3 to 5 years. So you should check your rain sensor and make sure it's working, especially since it's summertime and we do get a whole lot of rain. And if it's not working, replace it. Or you can have the best rain sensor of just turning off your system if it's the summer and we're getting a whole lot of rain. Other things you can do is you can address your landscapes, maybe reduce the amount of turf that you have or high volume irrigation, really utilizing micro irrigation as well, where you can use less water. Knowing and following the fact that we have water restrictions. So if you have irrigation in your landscape and it's not from reclaimed water, then you would be following this no more than 2 days a week. And you don't want to be watering in the middle of the day. That's when we lose the most through evaporation. We've been running a campaign reminding individuals to water less, especially since it's summertime. So you can see if it's going to rain in the afternoon and just turn off your irrigation. And so that's one of the best ways that if you're interested in sharing information to your community and reminding your neighbors that they also are making an impact on our water resources, sharing this graphic or sharing our messaging about reducing your irrigation is a great way to do that. We do have a water quality aspect of what we do. We have an extensive monitoring network with over 400 surface monitoring sites. A lot of our information is available, or all of our information is available on the website. There's a really nice portal if you want to look at how water quality is changing in specific areas in terms of status and trends. And one of the biggest concerns is our nutrient loading. And so nutrient loading is coming into our waterways from a lot of different sources. Some of what the district is doing to help address that is through some of our regional stormwater treatment facilities. So this is an example of one up in the Tri-County Ag area of St. Johns, Putnam, and Flagler County. A lot of that agricultural runoff had historically just been going straight into the St. Johns River. Wetlands, again, do a fantastic job of removing nutrients. And so by creating these wetlands, they're reducing the amount of nutrients in that water prior to it making its way out into the St. Johns River. Very similar to the treatment process that goes on in the Orlando wetlands, where wastewater is going into those created wetlands. And so the district is also helping local governments and utilities to divert that treated wastewater from our surface waters. And then the district is also responsible for flood protection. So we have about 100 major and minor flood control structures. Most of those are down in the Brevard and Indian River counties. We do have some in the Ocklawaha Basin, and we monitor those and control water levels based on the Army Corps of Engineers requirements. The last thing I want to tell you about, since y'all have talked about your interest in education, and if you have any middle and high schools that you're working with that are public or charter schools, we have a grant program that the application period is going on right now. It's for up to $2,000 to do a water-related project. It can be conservation, water quality, going somewhere on an awesome field trip, any of those kind of things. These are a few pictures of what previous groups have done, and I am happy to take any questions. Yes.
Battle, I'll air my private grievances. She wants it in each zone like an hour, and that seems excessive to me. What do you think?
Totally is excessive.
Yeah, we got a zero lot line home, you know, so it's not, I don't have a huge yard.
So The best thing to say is that it is not set on a specific amount of time. So what I would suggest that you do is that you eat a bunch of tuna or cat food, get some tuna cans, put them out in your yard, run it for 10 minutes, see how much water your system puts down. And then say, I need, or the recommended by UF-IFAS is that you need between 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch each application. And so that's the best way, because depending on the pressure and how much, what type of heads you have, it will put down different amounts.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So the question was, why do we allow bottling companies to send our water out of state? So I would say the short answer of that is because it is currently the law that if it is for a public benefit, if it is not going to impact neighboring water bodies or neighboring users, and if it is for the greater good, that it is going to get the permit. And so that is the way that it currently is written. So it's important to remember that during times of hurricanes, a lot of people will go out and buy bottled water even within Florida. And so there is that benefit to people. So I would say within our district, bottled water itself is a very small percent. It's like 1% of 1% of our total usage. And the sodas and beer industry utilize much more. But that's a really good question. But it's also in our district, it is a very small amount. So what are we going to do with being able to supply water for the growing population? Does that boil it down well enough? Okay. So some of the utilities within the Central Florida region especially have, and some of the local governments have begun changing the building code and the irrigation requirements. Some have banned irrigation in the backyard, so backyards will be all Bahia, and that's been really effective. There is a statewide program called Florida Water Star, which it is all about building indoors and outdoors with water efficiency, and it focuses mostly on irrigation systems, on having a specific size that's in the high volume irrigation. And so some local governments have utilized that as a way to decrease the overall amount of water that's getting utilized on landscapes. Another source of water that is going to be utilized and is being utilized is that reclaimed water. So that treated wastewater, being able to utilize it for beneficial use. There will be growing times that we are going to start looking at, is surface water going to be the way that we go? Are we going to start utilizing our rivers or lakes for portions of our water demands? And it's also through a combination of all of those that we'll be able to make sure that we're meeting the demands of our growing population. Yeah. So the question was, what is the feasibility of desalination? So within our district already, or within our state and our district, the aquifer water, once you get past Daytona, is starting to become too salty to provide out without any desalination. So they are using reverse osmosis in those treatment facilities. As you get saltier and saltier, like if we were to go to the ocean, it becomes much more expensive. And currently, the center portion of our state is where the greatest amount of constraint on our water resources is. And so building a pipeline to get that water, say from the ocean to the middle of the state, is even more expensive than trying to utilize other sources. But yes, currently, even within Florida, Tampa has a desal plant. They don't, I believe they don't run it continuously because it is so much more expensive. So our water from our Floridan aquifer is about $2 per 1,000 gallons to treat. our utilities, depending on where they are and what they do, they charge differently. But if we start thinking about using desalination, it's about $10 per 1,000 gallons. Yes, sir. So the first question was about the freshwater lenses that are off the coast. That is actually examined as a potential source of water in the newest water supply plan for the Central Springs East Coast region, because it is closer to them. Again, piping the amount of water that we're talking about gets quite costly. But that's one of the places that they're saying, okay, let's look at seeing if that's a reasonable source of where we can go to get that water. But I believe that although it's fresh water, it still would need some amount of treatment. The second question of gray water, this current legislative session, there were some statutes that came out that are allowing gray water systems and are promoting those gray water systems to be utilized in new construction to a much greater extent than they have been in the past. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. So we're in an area where we are surrounded by water and have lakes and rivers. What are they doing in the drier areas? Our water conservation coordinator recently was presenting with folks from Phoenix and California, and she was like, I feel a little bit strange saying how important water conservation is here in Florida when we do have such an abundance of water. But one of the things that is so important in terms of water conservation in Florida is that if we were to turn into a desert, or we were to, in a greater extent, utilize our freshwater wetlands and lakes for our water supply, our aquifers would not continue, like our overall water system
Yeah, but
and water cycle would get.
What do they do in Phoenix or Las Vegas or something?
I mean, Las Vegas, they use Lake Mead, but they just entered conditions where their water amount is being reduced greatly as well. So I am not sure how they provide water or regulate it or if they're desal or anything like that. I'm not as familiar with that.
You got 2 questions.
Okay. Okay, so there is one question of, could a stormwater retention pond with strategic shoreline plantings provide similar ecosystem services to wetlands? Oh, did you just plant that because you know how much I love littorals and plantings? So yes, so we have all of these stormwater ponds that are built within all of our developments. If we are able to change the way that they are maintained and landscaped so that they have more of that ecosystem service and ecosystem function of plants along, so those plants along the edges are called littoral plantings, it's where the water level fluctuates, then we can get a greater amount of the nutrients that get deposited within those stormwater ponds to be taken up by the plants and to get processed and released back into the atmosphere. And then, oh, can you scroll back up? Oh, but there was one more, somebody else, there we go. If we know we are going to be running low on water supply, why have what? So we already talked that one, okay. And how is the battle with the state of Georgia over the rivers going to impact us? It is not, because so the question about the Apalachicola, Chattahoochee Flint River lawsuit, it impacts the Apalachicola Bay. It doesn't impact our aquifers or our watersheds within our area, other than it's setting precedents of these interstate water disputes. Yes, sir.
Excellent presentation.
Thank you.
I actually understand everything and stayed awake the whole time.
Thank you. Thank you.
No, it seems like to me, water is almost like a stupid tax because of the fact that, you know, in Orlando, I mean, I understand if you're in Tampa, it's like sulfur water over there, but Orlando has really good water. Have you ever been studied? I mean, you're probably not involved in that, but it just seems silly. You even have to go through that. You probably don't do bottled water regularly, do you?
Me? No, I've sworn it off. After I carry my water bottle around, and pretty much whenever anybody asks me why are bottled water companies able to sell their water, I say they don't sell it to me, and it's all a supply and demand. So I think that that's another really important thing that I get that question a whole lot, and it's always funny to me because usually somebody has a bottle of water that's asking that question right in front of them, and I'm like, it also is going to stay within the state, you know. So
Kind of like a lot of being an itching tax.
I mean, I think, I wouldn't say that. I think it's become a major convenience, and people aren't thinking about the impacts of the plastic pollution, the fact that it is moving water around either within the state or around the country. But I think that our utilities are providing us with water that is of really high quality, really inexpensive. And so that's what I would say. Thank you. Thank you.
Next week, we have our scholarship students are going to be here. So please come and support the scholarship students. And once again, Carter, thank you for joining us today. So the message I just want to leave you with is remember, be safe, do business with Rotarians. And now, if you would, the four-way test. Things we think, say, or do, is it true? Is it fair? Concern? Will it build goodwill and better friendship? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? And is it fun? Thank you so much.